Cloud. This webinar is recorded not just for posterity purposes, but it's actually going to be on CanCertainty's YouTube channel and SlideShare channel. So I know that that's always a question that will come up, and you'll be able to access it on those two channels shortly after the webinar. So we're going to start today with Dr. Judy Glennie, who doesn't really need an introduction, but I'll do my best. Judy has decades of experience wearing almost every hat you could imagine in terms of the journey for a new medicine from concept to patient access. A pharmacist by profession, she has worked at Health Canada, served on the PMPRB, held leadership positions in the Ontario Public Drug Program, and led market access teams at an innovative pharmaceutical company. And she's now a go-to expert on pharma policy as president of JL Glennie Consulting. Judy is going to help kick us off with a brief background on the issue of implementation readiness. Judy will be followed by CanCertainty's co-founder, who provided a few words earlier, and we're going to have to get him to redo that for the recording's purposes. Bob Bick, who also has extensive experience in helping guide new therapies through the snakes and ladders of patient access in Canada. Bob will be followed by Dr. Sandy Sadev, medical oncologist at the Ottawa Hospital, and also co-chair of CCAF, which is the Cancer Clinician Advocacy Forum. CCAF has already made great strides in helping bring these issues to the forefront of policymakers across the country, and here where I'm sitting anyway in Ottawa. And it's pretty amazing considering that CCAF just launched earlier this summer. Batting cleanup, we've got one of my favorite patient group leaders with whom I've worked for many, many years. And one of my favorite things about working with you, Martine, is that we've jointly seen the impact of these new therapeutics. Back when I first started working with Myeloma Canada, it was regularly a celebration of life of people who had passed. That still happens, but it just seems more people that were around the table the previous year are still there. So I just thank you for that opportunity to be part of that journey, and you're one of Canada's preeminent leaders in policy and association leadership. And you're going to share a really cool tool called I2U, which helps guide health systems to prepare for implementation and integrating new innovations. And so I don't know if you heard when you were one of the attendees and I hadn't promoted you already. We're going to start with some of the problems we're failing to prepare. We're going to end with you and say, hey, here's how you can prepare. Here's a bit of a playbook. We're going to have a Q&A, and then we're actually going to have a call to action where Bob and Martine are going to talk about what people can do after this webinar and how you're going to use the outcomes from it. So with that, Judy, this is the agenda. I've sort of gone through that already. So I'm going to pass it over to you to talk through, the what of implementation readiness. Over to you, Judy.
Great, thanks, Bill. So these are just our objectives for today. So do you want to skip to the next one? All right. So I'm gonna start us out by talking a little bit about what we mean by health system implementation readiness, and then give you some links to references and some research that's been done over the last few years, just so that you have access to that or want to refer to it at some point in the future. So implementation readiness, I mean, we know all about health technology assessment, we know about pricing negotiations, we know about provincial listings, but as we experience and have access to more complex therapies, things like some of our rare disease products, some radioligand therapies, and the first, I think, category of drugs really was the CAR-Ts that really pushed this in a big way a few years ago. So as we get more and more of these complex therapies, it's becoming more and more clear that the health system itself, not only the payers and the decision makers need to do their thing, but the health system itself actually has to get ready. Sometimes it has to build buildings. Sometimes it has to get funding for additional ICU beds. It needs to get additional human resources and or train those people. So That's what we mean when we talk about implementation readiness, is in the health system itself, is it prepared to actually administer these new complex therapies after they're funded? Are we ready to then deliver the product to the patient? I've mentioned infrastructure, human resource education. Sometimes new processes have to be developed, whether that is transportation of cells from a patient to a processing plant and then back to the patient. This is not something that just, you don't just call up Purelator and they do it. There are very strict processes by which these things happen to maintain the integrity and the quality of this complex therapeutic so that it actually works in the patient. And then referral processes, whether, some of these complex therapies are not going to be administered in community centers. They're going to be in highly specialized areas, but making sure that patients who are in community centers can access these products through various referral systems is an important part of the patient actually getting access. But those referral systems actually have to be created and formalized and standardized. So that's what we mean at a very high level around what is health system implementation readiness. Next slide, please. So basically what that means is provincial funding of a new treatment is not the end of the road. I mean, it used to be that our greatest challenge was getting funding for companion diagnostics. That seems quaint, to be honest with you now. These other complex therapies, which I've listed the kinds of therapies, really require advanced planning, not just months of advanced planning, sometimes years of advanced planning to get the budget to create new infrastructure, new beds, new human resources, etc. And so that means that the health system not only needs to be more proactive in planning for this, they also need to be informed about the needs of these new products. And frankly, I don't think that with the royal we, the stakeholders within the health system, including industry, but also government agencies, have not done a good job of looping in the frontline healthcare system into the decision-making processes and awareness that is required in order for that frontline system to be ready to administer the drug ultimately once the product is funded. Next slide, please. So this epcoritamab is a, I guess it's almost a year now, a product that went through two relatively new accelerated processes at the National Health Technology Assessment level, as well as the national negotiation level. And to some extent, it is a success story. I'm not going to talk a lot about the various processes, but what ultimately ended up happening was that the HTA process and the pricing negotiation process for this product actually overlapped quite a bit. So it shortened, the time between, so if we go to LOI here, July 19th, the time between the pricing negotiations being completed with the letter of intent, LOI, being issued by the Pan-Canadian Pharmaceutical Alliance and listing in Ontario was less than a month. And that's unheard of based on the research that we've done over the last few years. So it was a real success story in terms of rapid health technology assessment and pricing negotiations and then provincial listing. In parallel, however, we look at the yellow bar at the bottom or the yellow arrow, there was also Ontario Health instituted a working group in March of 2024 to enable implementation readiness for these T-cell engaging antibodies, is what epcoritamab, that's the category of drug that it is. Unfortunately, that group their report didn't read out until a full year later, March of 2025, which is significantly different than the provincial listing announcement of August 2024. So clearly, still significant gaps between funding being available and actual direction on how to implement these products in the health system. That's the gap that we are trying to close. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. I'm just going to go through, I told you earlier that I wanted to share just a little bit of background information. So I've been working with a group of companies for several years now, and we've been looking specifically at Ontario, but I think there are a lot of lessons learned here, specifically in Ontario in terms of time to patient access. And our first publication was back in 2022, where we compared listing timeframes in Ontario compared to other jurisdictions. And Ontario did take notice and did start to take action based on this paper, which we're very grateful for. Next slide, please. Related to that paper, and this was published in November of 2023, I did a national review with my colleagues, Kathy Giese and Yan Yuan, looking at when do individual provinces actually start looking at what the implementation needs are for integrating a new product into cancer systems. Again, we're talking cancer here, but this could apply very similarly to any non-cancer complex therapy, cell or gene therapy, that kind of thing. And what we learned was that there are several provinces that do a really good job and start their planning in parallel to the initial health technology assessment recommendation. But there are also several, what I call laggards, sorry, who wait until the final pricing negotiation is completed, when the letter of intent is issued, before they even start looking at the implementation issues associated with a product. And that's frankly just not acceptable. There's no reason, and I think Bob will speak to this later, but there's no reason that those best practice provinces that start during the HTA process, some of them even earlier, should not be the standard. Because there are very few products that do not make it through the HTA process. There are also very few products that do not make it ultimately through the pricing negotiation process. The vast majority of products make it through both of those steps in patient access. And so, again, that is yet another indicator of the kind of thing that is, where there are gaps in provinces. And Ontario is certainly one of them. Next, the last slide I want to share with you is really just a summary of a stakeholder meeting that we did last year, almost a year ago, and sharing this primarily so that you have a link to the report that we published in November of last year. But what we did was bring together several groups of stakeholders to talk about this issue of implementation readiness, what some of the, not only problems are, but solutions. And in fact, we are continuing to talk to regional vice presidents, directors of operations in Ontario. This is Ontario specific work. And we hope to come up with some recommendations towards the end of this year, early next year, that are much more concrete and focused on the needs of people at the front lines of the healthcare system so that they can be better looped into this entire process. So that's kind of my background for you to contextualize this issue, and I'll hand it back to Bill, please.
Thanks so much, Judy. And we'll get Bob back on the line, if that's okay. Bob, I muted your camera, so you're gonna have to restart your camera because the first sort of question or comment or input we're gonna throw to you, and that's to better understand the value of patient group involvement in implementation readiness. So why and how do patient groups have to get involved in this? And is this an issue that you've seen as a leader at CanCertainty, Kidney Cancer Canada, and elsewhere? So over to you to walk us through that. I'll actually stop sharing slides for now.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Bill. First of all, why is this important to patients? And I think, one of the people who's articulated the best is Dr. Dave Stewart in his book, The Short Primer on Why Cancer Still Sucks. Basically, he says that delayed access equals loss of life, and he actually measures it. I don't have that data in front of me, but it's quite substantial, and it's very it's quite tragic that the delays that we're experiencing in Canada have such an impact on patient lives. So from a patient perspective, that's our motivation. What is the importance of this? I mean, as everyone knows, CanCertainty has been doing a fair bit of work on this issue over the last couple of years. I think that stakeholders, both patient groups and clinicians, as well as manufacturers, have a really important role here in shaping policy as well as driving urgency in the process. I mean, I think we all know when it comes to drug access issues or whether it comes to health policy in general, if we aren't out there making noise and applying pressure to the system, we're going to fall lower in priority. So that is why we have to constantly be, a force for change in this environment. And I think we're also, for instance, Barry Stein's Colorectal Cancer Canada is doing a lot of work, in what's called the hackathons in order to do a lot of real, research into this area about how we can, do a lot better job in Canada of moving therapies faster through the system. So we have a lot of credibility in the research front as well, international comparisons, baseline studies, etc. And so we bring to the table a lot more than just pressure. We bring to the table a lot of experience, knowledge, and international best practices. So I think we'll hear a bit more from me at the end here about the call to action and what some of the tangible things that CanCertainty wants to do in this area going forward, and a recap on some of the things we've done in the past. But I think really what we have to do is constantly be that partner in the system as well as that pressure point in the system to actually advance change.
Excellent. Thanks so much, Bob. In fact, one of Dr. Stewart's colleagues is going to join us now, and he was on earlier. I introduced him, Dr. Sandy Sadev, to just walk through the clinician perspective. And if I recall, just in terms of stats, what Dave Stewart was talking about was every week of delayed treatment, you're actually going to be losing about 4% of patients that otherwise might have benefited from access to therapy. So there is a way to actually measure this. But Sandy, why don't you talk about that, because I think you live it day to day, right?
Yeah, for sure. I'm not sure if you have my slides there as well.
I do,
Just
yeah. I'm
remind
going
me.
to call
Yeah.
them back up. Thank you.
So basically, about 39,000 life years lost in Canada over 5 years because of delays from proven therapies. And I think 79,000 globally per drug because of delays in implementation. So it really is a huge issue we face every day. This is to remind you, our CCAF group started because of frustrations around these kinds of issues, and improving efficiencies, equity, speed of access is one of our three main targets right now, including also speed of drug funding, of course, and biomarker and diagnostic testing. Mita Manna has joined me as a co-chair in Saskatchewan to give us a bit of a Western influence. I think Bill mentioned that it's been amazing since our launch. We've met with either ministers of health or senior leaders in the cancer programs from Alberta, Manitoba, Saskatchewan, Newfoundland already just in the last couple of months. So we're hopefully going to have some impact. Next slide. So we came together as a group because this is not, I'm not just speaking on behalf of oncologists, but clinicians, nurses and pharmacists are all finding this very frustrating. So the challenges we have, maybe separate from today's discussion, what about the funding problems, the delays from the silos and, passing the torch from one committee to another? Biomarker testing is a huge issue. We didn't really focus on that so much now, but the implementation of biomarker testing, and I don't always call them companion diagnostics. Companion means for drug X, you have test Y to go with it. But in general, NGS testing, so you can pick drug A, B, or C to offer the patient, there's a huge backlog and we're clearly behind. We need to have like a new test funding program, pan-provincial, where we all buy into this is an appropriate test to do. It should be standard of care. This is how it should be rolled out, quality assurance metrics, and then that can support every province kind of having to do it. We don't have that right now. It varies tremendously from hospital to hospital within Toronto, for example, and by province to province. Radiology, Dr. Stewart talks about this. We have fewer ultrasounds and CTs per capita than Chile or Turkey. We can't get an ultrasound for 2 or 3 months, sometimes for a suspicious lump in many academic centers. So the key thing is not to forget, these also affect implementation of new proven therapies. When I spoke to the Minister of Health from Alberta yesterday, I made the point that, we have patients now who used to have terminal diseases like melanoma, where half are being cured. And those that aren't being cured, like in breast cancer with new drugs, they're living twice as long. So that means they're going to need more tests and scans to monitor their progress, make sure they're not getting useless treatment. to find the right patient for the right medicine. That's going to double the number of scans we need to identify the patients for the right, initial staging investigations takes time. So we have to do that, at least at a second world or first world level. Next slide. So the challenges extend in implementation from the clinician's perspective to basic things. What about human resources? The formulas for assigning numbers of pharmacists, clerks, nurses, oncologists per capita, per region, are outmoded. We have now people living twice as long. We don't have enough clinic spaces. We haven't really added rooms in our big centers, for 10, 15 years, enough to accommodate the added flow. Nursing and pharmacy, the metrics to permit funding for those positions haven't changed the formula. So we're all struggling and trying to find ways to maybe accommodate this. We try to send some people back to their family doctor when they're cured for follow-up, and there's no family doctors. So the basics of infrastructure to allow us to do our jobs are being affected. Regional distribution, the equity access. Community centers are often larger than many academic centers. They can do your new high-tech stuff. They can do CAR T therapies. They already are. But to have the right resources available for them to be doable, like in Sault Ste. Marie and Thunder Bay, to better serve our First Nations, to allow equity for people who are not mobile, those are big gaps right now. I talked about space constraints. And what about IT limitations? We need modern EMRs. Alberta's been a leader in that, integrating of EMRs to do this, to deliver our care effectively, collect real-world evidence effectively to monitor our performance of our therapies. These are things in the background we can do. I think even for things like space, clinics, scanners, we can open beyond 5 p.m. We can work on weekends. Our staff is willing to accommodate that. We just need the okay and the budget to do that. Next slide. So, right now we have these rigid frameworks, we have silos, we have fixed budgets for hospitals. So one will find a budget to accommodate some things. William Osler in Brampton is a community hospital. They can do blood biopsies and NGS testing within days on many patients that they can't do at Princess Margaret or other centers because they've been nimble and they've been able to find internal savings formulas to do that. It should not be a postal code lottery to have to implement these kinds of things. The policies have been patchwork. They've not been unified. There's not been pan-provincial agreements, even, rapid development of provincial strategies. Next slide. So I think really we need to streamline things. We need cohesion. I think the governments now are trying to break down interprovincial barriers. Just last week, I think it was announced that in Ontario, we're accepting credentials for architects, numerous types of scientists to be credentialed in Ontario from other provinces. We need that for our staff. We need to have more pan-provincial processes to get these things implemented more quickly. Our capacity issues are phenomenal, long overdue, in order to treat our patients properly. Or we can be honest as provinces and say, you know what, we just can't afford it. Let's be honest. We are willing to accept mediocrity and maybe to go to a second world level of medicine. Just yesterday, I had patients where they have treatments that are approved, indicated, not yet funded, or they're funded in such narrow lines of therapy, I cannot implement them in my practice for even young people tomorrow. Technology adoption, we need to have more seamless pathways, faster diagnostics, and quality metrics to implement them properly. It's funny, when I meet with government, we're always told, make sure you focus on your one ask. And right now we feel a bit paralyzed because we haven't got GPs or scanners or, the blood tests we need. So it's really hard to do that. But I think a cohesive strategy like Judith is talking about, to focus on implementation broadly and do what we can do more effectively in a faster way, take the best practices from Quebec, from the UK, just do them. It doesn't seem to cost more globally in those jurisdictions than we're paying now. Next slide. I think that's it for me.
Thanks, Sandy. I'm going to get Martine back up on screen. Really appreciate that. Yeah, tell us a bit more about patient group involvement in implementation readiness and who can do what.
Sure. Thank you, Bill. You're getting the feisty Martine today, because this is really important. You can put the next slide, please. I mean, you look at the science and it's moving at light speed, and unfortunately the bureaucracy is not catching up at all. And that's the big problem. I look at what happens in myeloma, where 8 years ago, CAR T was just a twinkle in the eye of researchers presented at international conferences. And today, patients 5 years out, 30% of patients who were heavily pretreated are still alive today. So, and we still don't have access to CAR T in Canada. It's been reviewed by Health Canada, it's been recommended by CDA, and it's still in negotiation. And it's been negotiation for 2 years now. So, science is advancing, but bureaucracies sort of is still in the dark ages, if I can use that. And it's really important that even though when you get a drug that is, recommended and you've got a listing agreement, the time to patients is also increasing tremendously. I mean, Judy showed us an example where, Ontario went through light speed in putting a drug or approving a drug, but by the time the guidelines were developed and implemented, it was almost a year later. That's not acceptable for patients. Absolutely not. So, what do we do? What can we do? Next slide, please. So I was fortunate enough to participate in the project that was called I2U, so Innovation to Patient, that was developed by Santis Health, and it was funded by Novartis. And I had the opportunity to work with a number of really esteemed, colleagues that were from a health policy background, physicians, had experience in how to bring drugs to patients. And what we focused on was on the post-listing sort of time frame. Like, it wasn't about the process of getting the drugs to an approval, but how do you implement, and really spoke to the issues that we're talking today. So, what we focused on was really looking at not the sequence of what should happen, because that's irrelevant. The sequence should start at the day zero, where implementation is the key issue. And we know that the complexity of the new technologies that are coming to market need to have those conversations way early on. And so, as soon as you think you've got a product that's going to be developed and it's going to be very innovative in the way that it's going to sort of change or transform the lives of patients, you have to have those discussions. So that's the approach that we took in developing, and you can get the next slide, please. That would be great. Developing a tool that could help patient organization or stakeholder that are having conversation as to why this is important. Why do we have to have those conversations about implementation early on in the process? Because we heard from barriers, from Judy, from barriers from constructing, sort of research facility or buildings, or assigning resources, be it, beds, or be it, nurses or technical healthcare staff, is really important. So we looked at, 4 different case studies. One was obviously, CAR T, CRISPR, and Leqembi and Luxturna, which are very complex, types of innovations from an implementation perspective. And the process that we used was framed in sort of a question, and sort of a think about it as AI to understand what the barriers and the enablers are in opening up availability or facilitating implementation. So next slide, please. So the idea with the I2U tool is to develop sort of a scorecard. I mean, I remember some people are on the call today, remember, and I can't, there used to be a cancer access to drugs scorecard about 10 years ago that was done every year. And we looked at, how are drugs being reviewed and approved. And that had a lot of impact, because people don't like to be scored in 5 or 4s, or they like to be 8, 9, 10s, or they don't like to be in the red column. They really want to be in the green column. So the idea of this tool is to create something that we as patient organization can bring to decision makers, and we can input the information that we have about a new technology at day 0, at day 10, year 1, year 2, and sort of adapt the tool as things are changing, so that we can go and advocate and make the case as to why it's important to create those beds, to create those resources, to create those protocols. So I really encourage, this doesn't mean that this is the only thing you should be using, but it's certainly a tool that is very helpful and can make the case for you. At the end of the day, it's really about the patient. And one example that was brought to my attention the other day is a patient needed a CAR T and lives in province A. And the province A did not deliver the CAR T, was not able to deliver the CAR T. So they made arrangements with province B to fly that patient to that province for their CAR T. This all happened during the Air Canada strike. So patients could not go and get their CAR T, had to wait until they were able to get a flight. I don't know if the patient was able or not to get the CAR T, but you can just imagine that's because of implementation issues. So, that's not right that a patient has to go through this. Every province should make, these drugs available. It doesn't mean it have to be everywhere in every center, but at least in one or two centers of excellence. If we can solve this problem, next slide, please. I think we're going to have, a lot more happier patients, happier healthcare system, happier payers. But we can't do this alone. We have to work with, obviously, all of the various stakeholders that are at the table, who all have a point of interest in this question and finding a solution. So hopefully, this in next year will not be a big topic or an important topic for us to discuss, because we'll have solved this problem. Over to you, Bill. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Martine, and I'd invite the other panelists back onto the screen. This is great. Maybe Bob, throw it over to you, because you can remind Martine about that scorecard that hasn't been around for quite some time, which the CCAC or something like that. It was, if I'm not mistaken, acronym soup. Remind us where that scorecard was and where it is now.
I'm sorry. Maybe you have to do this, Bill. I'm not sure what you're talking about there.
It was the Cancer Advocacy Coalition of Canada with Colleen Savage.
Thank you, Sandy. I probably should have thrown to you, but yes, excellent.
You're talking about the report card.
Yeah,
that's what Martine was referencing.
Sorry,
yeah.
The report card. So
I
yes,
couldn't remember who it was, so sorry about that. But thank you, Dr. Sadev. Yes, it was Colleen.
Yeah, it was Colleen Savage's who was the executive. Yeah, so that where and that is some important work that CanCertainty is looking to revive, as far as doing a much more of a ranking of a whole number of different areas of our cancer care system, not just the speed to access and implementation issues, but a whole range of other things, comparing one province to another, a lot of benchmarking, etc. But Bill, if you can put up the slide deck for a second, I want to use this opportunity to remind some of the CanCertainty Coalition members, if you can go down a little bit, of some that go down a bit more. So just want to remind some that we've done a fair bit of work at CanCertainty on focusing on the issue of time to patient. Now we're going to, so in the past, last year, I did some work with Barry Stein to raise awareness in advance of the Council of the Federation, where they were dealing with the issue of the pilot that was promoted by Doug Ford, for rapid access. So we did an op-ed that it landed in a lot of different newspapers across Canada, a lot of promotion around that. There's a little sampling there. Before that, next slide, please. Did some work with Louise Binder, where we also addressed that issue as the whole issue of this pilot was coming to the fore. And next slide, please. We also CanCertainty provided to our coalition members a kit on doing some basic advocacy to try to raise the issue amongst all the provincial payers and drug program leads about the issue that we're facing, about the timelines. Both Judy Glennie and as well as the Conference Board of Canada had done bits of research, or big chunks of research around this, that identified, as I think Judy mentioned, that it was sort of that Quebec was the best case, an average time to implementation of 44 days past PCPA negotiation. That compares with other provinces. Ontario was 242 days for cancer drugs. So we did a writing campaign to raise awareness of that issue. Going forward, I want to tell CanCertainty Coalition members that we're going to put a lot of a sharper point on this. We're going to now be talking about how we have to focus on some of these implementation issues. We're going to be, providing you with a kit to drive awareness again, amongst provincial health ministers and drug program leads about the ITU tool that's available, about the opportunity for better collaboration, and the need to act and to apply pressure on the system to actually start doing better for patients. So you can look forward to that. We're going to be addressing two basic tracks. I look at the opportunities here to be, the Ontario pilot is interesting, right? But there's no other provinces other than Ontario that have jumped on board with this yet. I've been conceptualizing an opportunity to maybe drive an observer status for provinces because they seem to be somewhat reluctant to jump on board. Maybe we can do something. People on this call might recall how the Pan-Canadian Oncology Drug Review originally started as a pilot in Ontario. It was the interim joint oncology drug review, which was based on Ontario's drug review program, and they provided an observer status for all other provinces to sort of participate. So we're going to be trying to drive some notion of participation around that model. And also, we're going to, like I said, we're going to be looking at the all other drugs, the overall timeline issue for implementation for the drugs that wouldn't fit into that pilot. So stay tuned. That's some of the work that CanCertainty will be focusing on in the next number of months to empower our coalition. And I want to also say that CanCertainty has been in lockstep with the Cancer Clinician Advocacy Forum.
Oops.
Oh, I think your microphone just turned off for some reason. And now your video froze. Oh, you were just getting on a roll. I'm going to show just on the screen briefly. This is who all of the different organizations that comprise CanCertainty. It's quite impressive as one of the umbrella associations or groups or forums for many people to come together. And hats off to you, Bob, because it's never easy to herd cats and to get a consensus across stuff. But you're so good at it. Here you're back.
Sorry about that.
I'm just lauding you and saying CanCertainty is a very effective coalition, and somehow you managed to bring this group together to find consensus around some really important policy decisions. You started as an organization focused on the take-home oral drug situation in Ontario, but through the hot topics and other initiatives, CanCertainty is really weighing in on issues like system implementation. So I just thought I'd throw this slide up too. Bob, just briefly, I want to go back to Judy. I'm going to stop sharing screen again for this discussion part. First of all, I'd encourage folks to use the Q&A in the chat. So please throw in your questions and comments. Bob referred to a pilot project in Ontario, a faster access project. You walked through one of the handful of examples of temporary access programs that is available in the current Pan-Canadian system. How do those two potentially either tie up or merge? Are they different? And then I want to bring it back to system implementation questions. If people do their homework and prepare earlier, can that actually enhance those systems that you were talking about in terms of EPKINLY in the case of the one that went through PTAP and TLR, and or the Ontario pilot project? Do you want to give us just a bit background? What is this Ontario pilot project that people are excited about?
Well, I mean, I only know what other people know based on what's in the news. So, and far as I know, discussions are still ongoing, et cetera, et cetera. So about a year ago, Premier Ford tried to encourage the Council of the Federation to have a national approach to accelerating access to therapies. The vision being to start with Project Orbis products. Project Orbis is an international regulatory collaboration basically focused on oncology drugs, and they were going to use drugs designated under Project Orbis as the ones that they would pilot. By the way, Project Orbis the list of drugs hasn't been updated by the FDA since March of this year. So at least last I checked a couple of weeks ago. So I guess the intent is, excuse me, the intent is for, at least now, Ontario's going it alone. And working with industry, looking to create processes that accelerate Ontario's, uh, Ontario taking the results out of HTA and pricing negotiation processes and implementing in Ontario. The vision, I think, is for things to be more parallel, similar to what we saw in the Ipkinley process. Again, where it is, when the announcements will be, hopefully soon. No one knows for sure. At least I don't know for sure. But I think it's a good um, a good move for Ontario, because Ontario has been a laggard compared to other provinces in terms of the implementation side of things. I want to flip over to the implementation issue, though. And to me, the implementation readiness is really all about the people who are in the health system. And people in the health system need two things. One, they need information early so that they understand what changes they may need to make within their individual health systems, because what PMH in Toronto needs may be very different from what Ottawa needs or from what London needs. They need that information early because they have to put budgets together, and those budgets have to be approved and then, implemented. But I think also those people need to be brought into the loop earlier. So right now, our systems really do not, and our individual stakeholder groups, industry, for instance, does not typically see the front line, or let me be more precise. The market access people in industry don't necessarily see the front line regional vice president of the cancer system as one of their customers. So they're not updating or doing pipeline meetings with that level of customer within the health system. They are focused more on people in government who are making this decisions around funding. And those people in government are not necessarily sharing information with people in the front lines of the health system. So for me, implementation readiness is all about helping the people at the front lines of the health system understand more earlier. Because literally, we've been told by regional VPs that they find out on Friday that funding for Product X is available starting Monday. And that's the first they've heard of it. Is that for all companies? I mean, there are some companies that have started to do this, and I applaud them. But this needs to be the standard approach, especially with these complex therapies. So I'll stop there. I'm sure
And
others.
you mentioned several centers in Ontario, and that's where you've worked most of your professional life, Dr. Sadev. But I want to go to Quebec briefly. Martine, that's where you yourself are based. And, Quebec seems to get through a little bit faster. And that may be, do you want to explain why that could be in terms of ENES and how ENES as an HTA organization is integrated with the system?
Sure. I mean, I think now is becoming a fallacy that Quebec is getting faster because, we're seeing decisions that are made by ENES and there's no money available by government to implement those. We saw this with CAR-T, and, even with like a process like the médicament de nécessité particulière, which is a process that patients can get, drugs that are not recommended or outside of the process, or that have been approved by ENES, but is still not yet available. The problem is that, and Judy alluded to this, is that at the healthcare system, the decision may be made to, yes, we will fund this drug, but at the bedside of the patient, the pharmacist at the hospital is managing their budget, and they're now being told, you've got to give this drug to a patient, but they're not getting additional budget to do so. So, they're accountable at the end of the year to managing, what their bottom line is. And, we've seen this happen in Quebec where patients have, waiting for a drug, there was nothing else that was available to them, but they couldn't get access to it because the pharmacist refused it at the hospital, and it took 3 and 4, go-arounds to be able to convince the pharmacist to, and it's not that person's fault, it's the system fault that's not putting in place the right sort of, accountability or track the budget to make these drugs available for patients. And obviously it's very, this particular case I'm thinking about, the patient was at the end of their potential treatments, and it was kind of this last treatment. And it's that or death, and it's you're stuck with a bureaucratic decision where people are not talking to each other, and that is a big problem. People think that once it's listed or it's recommended, you've got your LOI, the provinces got their 2-3 months to sort of finalize the discussions and make the drug available, that it's available in the arms of the patient. I think we really need to talk about time to patient. Even, I mean, right now we're working on some sort of PR and media coverage during Blood Cancer Awareness Month, and talking to some of the journalists, they think that once it's listed, it's available for patients, and this notion of time to patient needs to be really spelled out, and that's what we need to talk about in the community, because it's the patient at the end who don't get these drugs, and people say, well, no, it's available. Yeah, but no, it's not available. Patient cannot get it because the system between this listing agreement and getting into their arm is flawed.
When I remember early days working with myeloma, when Aldo would be, and I'm sure myeloma is still doing that, looking around the world for the next innovation, right? Maybe I'll bring it back over to you, Sandy. I mean, you go to ASCO or you've been to ESMO, you've traveled all over the place. When you know something new is coming for one of the cancers that you treat, do you say, okay, that's interesting. I'm sure my patient will get that in 2 years. Or are you making every effort to try to get that a little bit earlier? And is there something that you can bring back from your global travels, Sandy, to help inform CCAF and what's next for this implementation readiness challenge?
It's a bit of both. When we see these massive advances, even the ones that get standing ovations, and the hematology oncology world has become somewhat different, but they're happening with an equal onslaught in regular cancers. We feel celebratory, but also we feel a bit of, oh no, how the hell are we going to get this for my patient tomorrow who will read about this and may be eligible for it? That implementation, that urgency drives all of us. I think the processes involved need to feel the same rush the patients and we feel. When there's a new advance that we have to implement in our clinic, we sometimes break down walls, add chairs, add weekend hours, and we do it. And government still works on their bureaucratic, 9 to 5. Our committee will meet in 3 months, and that's just not acceptable. So I think that recognition of that reality is important, and also the recognition that costs are going to increase in the cancer budget. The real costs are, of course, hidden because of confidential rebates and such. But we have to find ways to adapt that reality. And can we not kind of cut and paste from other jurisdictions and countries that are doing it effectively, paying less at the global level, per capita for drugs than we're doing, and delivering better than we are? One point to your, ASCO example is Australia now. They have processes where their hemoncs and oncs meet with cancer agency people nationally twice a year, and they have a horizon scan. It's very informal, but this is coming. We have to prepare for this. So we can do that too. We also need better real world evidence. So if we give early fast track or PTAP kind of access, we can really collect the data accurately afterwards with, better EMRs, with better systems to collect it. We're set up for that. Canada has few oncology centers per capita. We're very integrated. We're very centralized. We're very motivated, so we can collect that data. We just have to be enabled to do that properly to make this all happen effectively.
Thanks, Sandy. Judy and Bob, I'm just cognizant of Canada's Health Agency, for the organization formerly known as CADIF. I'm going to still say that because it's kind of fun. I know I'm in trouble, aren't I, Bob, for saying that? But Canada's Health Agency or Drug Agency and Ines both have requirements in their submission processes especially from manufacturers, but also from clinicians and to some extent patients in terms of implementation issues. There's also the treatment algorithm process that we've talked about, where that sort of sits, which could also highlight some of these implementation issues. What's the role of these two agencies in tackling the challenges and opportunities that we've talked about today?
So I think,
Um,
oh, sorry.
So
I'm just gonna,
I'll just make one quick point. I
yeah.
mean, I think it's good for implementation issues to be on the table and part of the discussion at the HTA bodies. The problem is it's not early enough. So by the time, CDA is, discussions are being had at CDA around a file, I mean, the reality is the health system people need to have known about it at least a year prior to that. So it's too late. So it's not going to solve anything, but I think it still needs to be part of the discussion. And it's also not granular enough to help those frontline people. So it's too late and it's not granular enough. But I still want to see it as part of that HTA review so that there's that awareness that there are implementation issues for a file. So I'll leave it at that.
Thanks, Judy. Bob?
Yeah, I mean, I was going to say the exact same thing. It's not early enough, and certainly, the issue, one of the big issues about it not being early enough is that, we're participating as stakeholders up front in the clinician or patient input. It takes a long time for that to come out and be published in a recommendation. So maybe there's maybe there's an opportunity for Canada's Drug Agency to take that portion out and at least provide it to PCPA and their provincial payers, the advice that they're getting in those documents before an actual drug recommendation. There should be no reason why they couldn't actually fast track that section out to the people who actually have to work on implementation.
Excellent. Okay, final words from anyone. I'm just cognizant of time. Imagine if you had to go and tag one other stakeholder and say, "Hey, you're it. This is what you could do," because I've heard some notes that manufacturers could do something better, that certainly policymakers could do something better, evaluators, et cetera. So maybe we'll go around the horn, tag somebody and say, "Hey, have you thought of this?" Judy, I know you're having a hard time picking one, but why don't we start with you?
Well, I would, because companies are the ones who have the information and know the product the best, I think they have to take some leadership and start reaching out to, I would call them, they're not non-traditional customers in terms of helping those frontline folks. And it's not just the clinicians at the front line, it's the operational managers at the front line to help them prepare for these products.
Excellent, thanks. Sandy, tag somebody and give them a suggestion.
Yeah, I think at the CDA level, when they're requesting implementation input from patients and clinicians, I would put more attention to they want to know what the impact will be in terms of how we need to implement, but really to make a focus on recommendations around those, like particularly biomarker genomic profiling. If there's no infrastructure, how to implement those, or even to get the PET scans done to qualify and select the patients, there's no point in any of this. So to have a cohesive recommendation to the provinces to say this will be necessary.
Excellent. Thank you. Martine, are you ready?
Yes, I'm ready. I agree with what's been said by Judy and Dr. Sadev. I think patient groups need to play a bigger role in this discussion and holding feet to fire from both, industry and government and HTA. Many of us do attend these, global conferences where we see the advancement of research and we see it coming and the results are really exciting. But these are complex therapy. I mean, I think in myeloma, maybe we made the mistake to think that, this CAR T would go through for lymphomas and leukemias, and, we would sort of ride their coattail, but that's not happening. So my lesson to me is that to get involved early and make it happen, because They figured out how to to deliver the CAR Ts in those other cancers. It's not any different if you give it for myeloma. The process is the same. It's the product that's different. So what is it that's blocking? Get involved early.
Way to go. You tagged yourself. That's awesome.
I did. I tagged myself.
Well done. Bob, go for it. Your last word to you, and then we're going to close it out.
Yeah, I mean, I think since Martina already hit the advocacy requirements, I'll talk about the issue at the provincial level. Why is everyone doing this individually? So maybe either CAPCA or PCPA has to take on a greater responsibility in the horizon scanning and fostering collaboration amongst all provinces to actually start to address this collaboratively as opposed to individually.
Amazing. All right. Well, thank you all panelists. I mean, you didn't see it necessarily in terms of how we presented, but special thanks to you, Judy, for helping with the content and framing of this issue and being a leader on it. This webinar wouldn't have happened without you really pulling us together to make this happen. And we'll see you, many of you, next time in different forums. Keep an eye out for the next Hot Topics webinar. I think it's October 10th. Same time, same channel. We'll see you then. In the meantime, have a wonderful weekend, everyone. Take care. Enjoy tagging people and getting that call to action implemented. I see somebody else in the Q&A. Oh, Christina, great to see you there. Thanks very much, everyone, for joining. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
You.